I can find something of.
Oh yeah, definitely. Extraterrestrials, quantum physics, um, the new human, the new Earth.
Yeah. We got one big test that's taking place as we speak, which I can talk about, which will flip the world upside down if it works.
Yeah, no, that's definitely that's perfect. All right. So, thank you, Grant, for joining me today again on Quantum Healing Today, where we will be shining light on natural healing. So any discussion topics are open, and I don't have a list of questions rolled out for you. So we will kind of see where this goes, how it plays out. And since we are also live on YouTube, we will also take some live Q&A from anyone interested or comments.
Good.
So thank you again before we start. And so
Thank
I just
you.
want to start with you, Grant, before we get into the knowledge,
Okay.
right? So
Yeah.
let's see who Grant Cameron is, and how was Grant as a boy growing up, and how did you get into these topics? And I guess share any other information that might stand out, like maybe if you
Okay.
had experiences or abilities, anything you want to share.
Good. Okay, so basically, the way it starts with me is I was raised in a sort of a middle class family, but very religiously. My father wasn't religious at all. My mother was very religious, church organist, all sorts of stuff. I was sort of brought up by my mother, hoping I would be a minister. And at one point, I had considered doing that, and then sort of figured this wasn't this was I didn't really believe this stuff that was going on here as to what it was, but that was actually the advantage that I got in that I saw everything as ontological. Where are we coming from? Where are we going? What are we doing here? And that has worked out well for me in terms of my experience. So it all starts with me, I guess, the paranormal stuff. I had read Edgar Casey. I was fascinated with Edgar Casey, the idea of trans-channeling and him predicting the future, all this kind of stuff. And I was about 21. I was going to university. Um, I couldn't figure out why I was in university. I couldn't figure out what the heck I would do with this stuff. I was doing, calculus, which I pulled out of because the guy wouldn't explain to me what a function was. I figured, like, well, where'd the numbers go? This is nonsense. How the heck do you make any money out of this stuff? I was learning in university. I just couldn't figure out what it was all about. And it was at that time when there was, I live in Canada and I live on the West Coast now, but then I lived in the middle of the country. And there was a small town that was having UFO sightings and a lot of them. And so I said to my friend, we used to drive around the big city of Winnipeg, Manitoba. And I said to him, why don't we, instead of driving around Winnipeg, why don't we go and see what everybody's looking at? And he said, yeah, okay, we'll go. This was February of 1975. And of course, we didn't go because neither of us really had any interest in it. And it came to be May of 1975, and the local TV station caught this thing jumping off the ground. So if you're familiar with the Nimitz story of the Nimitz, where the UFO goes from 80,000 feet down to sea level in 7/8 of a second, that's what happened, except it went from ground level to 5,000 feet in the air in about 3 frames of film. So about 1/8 of a second, it jumped 5,000 feet from the ground. And the TV station made a big deal out of this, and there was this what's called a flash frame. 1 frame of film, the whole horizon lit up, the entire for 1/8 of 1/24 of a second. And then the thing flew across the sky and it was moving up and down and it was rotating. You see it was rotating and stuff. And I went, whoa, man, we should go see what they're looking at. And as I always explained it, it was like you buy the lottery ticket, there's a chance you can win, but you ain't gonna win. There's no way. I mean, yeah, there's a chance. But I could go out there and we're not gonna see anything. Everybody else can see the thing. But it came back to this idea of the paranormal. I'd never seen anything paranormal in my life. And when I saw the object, and I'll explain that in a minute, but when I saw the object, I went, oh my goodness, there are miracles. It was like, whoa. I thought like, oh, that I'm so honored to see this. I was so lucky. I never thought I'd ever see this. We were out there and we didn't see anything for about an hour. We were driving around and there was three of us there. I was in the passenger seat. My friend was driving and we drove into town, out of town, into town, and we're looking around like, what's everybody looking at? And we saw planets and stars, and I had no background in that kind of stuff, but I was like, whatever they're looking at ain't very impressive. And my friend said to me, he said, okay, we'll drive back into Carmen, which was the town that was involved. We'll drive back into Carmen. If we don't see anything, let's go home. I said, fantastic, been a total waste of time. So we turned the car to go back into the town for the last time, and it appeared from the left to the right, and nobody in the car, this is important, nobody in the car said, is that what it is? I wonder if that's what they're looking at. Everybody's went, there it is. It's like, oh, it was just so bizarre. It was like, oh, there it is. That's what they're looking at. And it flew right in front of the car, maybe half a mile down the road, but it was very, very low. Right in front of the car. And I remember it was going in behind these set of school buses that were being parked outside the town. And I'm getting out of the car. The car's not even stopped yet. I'm getting out of the car because I want to run through the ditch and I want to get to these school buses so I can see it as it goes when it goes behind the school buses. And so I took all my friends out 2 nights later, and I said to them, "Man, you got to see this. This is the most amazing thing you ever seen in your life." And all these friends came out there, and about an hour later, they said, we're going back to Winnipeg." I said, "No, no, don't go, don't go. This is amazing. You'll change your life. You see this thing. It's just amazing." And I remember they said, "No, no." I remember said, "No, we're going back to Winnipeg. We're hungry. We're going back to Winnipeg for pizza." And so they all turned around and packed up. So there was about 27 people when this thing started, and there was people all over the place because the city, everybody had heard these stories about them getting the film and that sort of stuff. And then there was kids who were drinking, they would get a case of beer and go into the country because it's just a small town of 2,000 people. So there's people all over these, and they were called mile roads. So there's a mile road going this way, mile road, like this checkerboard thing. And there were people all over the place. And by the time this thing actually came, there was only about eight of us left, eight or nine of us left. There's two cars. And I remember there was our car. It had some kids, 14, 15-year-old kids that we had brought from the street along to see this thing. And this time it was a bit different. First time it looked like a plasma type object, uh, glowing red, very bright, sort of going very, very slow, maybe 30 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour, bobbing up and down, just very, very bizarre. So the second night, it was a flash on the horizon. We were looking for the airport because that was where the guy was doing. He was like the main guy who was telling people where to go and stuff like that. We were looking for it's just a small airport, and it didn't have any runway lights, so it was only a daytime airport. And of course, we couldn't find it. We were sitting right outside it. We didn't realize we were sitting outside it. We're looking into the west, and there's this flash in the sky. And so one of the kids said, "Grant, is that it?" And I'm looking, and I'm going, "I guess so." And then it flashed again and flashed again. It was jumping around the sky like a ping pong ball. And I remember there was a guy beside us in the car. It was a courier car, and there was a girl and three guys, and the guy had a camera with what was these um, what do they call them? They advance the film very fast. It's a motor drive on a camera. So it would advance the film very, very fast. We were using 35 millimeter cameras at the time. So it would go click, zzz, click, zzz, and I could hear him unloading the camera. Click, zzz, click, zzz, click, zzz, and as he's advancing the film, and this girl is crying. She says, "I can't see it. I can't see it. Someone show it to me. I can't see it." She's crying, and people are swearing and yelling and screaming. It was just bizarre as it came towards us, it's flashing around the sky. And as it came towards us, then it turned into this object, which is, I always remind people, just because you see an object, it's kind of a waste of time because it can actually change. And that's what happened here. It started as this white flashing light flash bulb thing jumping around the sky. And it came and it was the same object I'd seen the first night, except it had a green glow on the back of it. And it came right at us and maybe half a mile away from us. And then it sort of made this sort of turn and it sort of went back sort of in the direction it had come from. And remember I was looking at it as it was flying away. And I go, that is so amazing. That could be an extraterrestrial from another planet. This is so cool. I actually got to see this thing. And then I thought to myself, what's it doing? It's not doing anything, which is one of the key things I talk about with the UFO phenomena, is it wasn't doing anything. It was just flying along. We used to make a joke like we were right on the Canadian border. So he used to make this joke. Well, it's the Americans. They got this really weak beer. It's just like water, you know. So the aliens are coming and they're picking up beer and they're going back to the United States because we've got better beer. And because we couldn't figure out what it was. And I remember I went back 35 years later and asked the guy who ran the airport, and I said, Bob, why were they here? Why this little tiny town? Because we didn't have any military, didn't have any nothing that you could think of why they would be there. And he said, you know why they're here? And I said, no, Bob, I don't know why they're here. It's been 35 years. I never could figure out why they're here. He said, I told you in 75 why they're here. And I said, no, Bob, I absolutely have no idea why they're here. And he said, the missile silos. I told you that. And then I realized, and as that story went on, I won't bore you with the whole story, but it actually turned out that they had 1975, they'd built the only anti-ballistic missile unit that ever went operational in the United States. They'd put in 100 new nuclear missiles in the United States to shoot down Russian missiles because the Russian missiles were going to try to, the number one target is the missiles. You got to take out the missiles before you take out the cities. And North Dakota had 300 Minuteman III missile silos, and then they had added 100 new ones to shoot down the Russians. So there's 400. So if North Dakota had been a country, it would have been a nuclear superpower. There was a lot of nuclear missiles in North Dakota, and that's the conclusion we came to. That's why they were because in November of 1975 they made a treaty with the Soviet Union to take the missiles out, and the UFOs went away. So that's how it started for me, and it went along. And I did what everybody's doing now. UFO sightings and the conspiracy thing. I wrote 4 books, actually 5 books. One hasn't been published yet on the whole government conspiracy. What are they covering up? Who knows? Have they got bodies and crafts? Where the aliens from? All this kind of stuff. And then I had this experience which changed everything in 2012, and that was in Laughlin, Nevada at the World UFO Congress. And I used to go there because it was warm. I mean, I lived in the coldest major city in the world, and Laughlin, Nevada was like summertime during the winter. So it was February, and we'd go down there for 9 days, or 8 days, I think the conference was. And you'd watch all these speakers, and it was a thing where it would be all day and all night. So you didn't go to all the lectures. You would sit there and wait. You'd say, "When are we going for lunch?" Well, this guy's lecturing. I'm not interested in this garbage. Well, let's go for dinner. We'll go back and watch this other guy lecture. And that's the way it was. So you do this. And so Colin Andrews was coming up and with crop circles and consciousness and crop circles. And I really thought, nah, I'm not interested in crop circles. I really care about crop circles. And I'm thinking, well, I should go in the crop. Maybe I go across the river to the library and sit in the library and play, read books and stuff like that. And I thought, man, he's a pretty major guy. I've never seen him lecture. I should pay him respect and go to his lecture or whatever. And I was in that lecture, and Desta Barnaby and I wrote a book on contact modalities. And one of the contact modalities is to daydream. It's to zone out. And that's what had happened. I had zoned out during this lecture. I wasn't interested. I wasn't interested. So I was sort of paying attention, not paying attention. He's talking. And all of a sudden, these 3 things came into my head that basically said, this is consciousness. This is how it works. And I didn't, the joke I make is, in 2012, I couldn't have spelled consciousness and I couldn't have cared less. So I'm sitting there and this comes into my head, and there was 3 things. One was the Canadian government document. Suddenly I realized the Canadian government document in 1950 had said UFOs are real. It's the most highly classified subject in the United States. And American officials also told us that other things might be associated with the flying saucers, such as mental phenomena. So in 1950 already, the American government knew, and they told the Canadian government that mental phenomena was part of the UFO thing. And I didn't know what that really meant. And then in 1991, we had a conversation with Dr. Eric Walker, who I believe is the highest ranking official anybody's ever talked to about UFOs. And he was talking to us and talking in rhymes and riddles and answering our questions and stuff like that, telling us to leave it alone. There's nothing to do about it and stuff like that. And at one point he said, let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP? And the guy who was doing the interview didn't know anything. He said, well, I don't know. He said, look, unless you understand about ESP and how it works, you will not be taken into the control group. Very few people understand how this works. And then the last one, and all these things came into my head at exactly the same time. The third one was Ben Rich from Lockheed Skunk Works, 1993, 2 years after Walker, is giving a lecture at UCLA to the engineering alumni. And he talks about, we've discovered the equation to take ET home and all this kind of stuff. And as he's ready to leave the building, Jan Harrison, who was then the director of MUFON, went after him and he said, "Look, I had this sighting when I was a little kid in the backyard, and this UFO was there, and I need to know. I spent my whole life trying to figure out propulsion. How do they get here? How does the propulsion system work?" And Ben turned around and he said exactly what Walker had said 2 years before. He said, "Let me ask you a question. What do you know about ESP?" And Jan said, "It means everything in time and space is connected." He said, "That's how it works." Turned around, walked away, and got in his car and drove off. And so that was the whole thing. And so it was this conscious thing, and it just sort of grew from year to year. I understand more. Well, it's actually non-local consciousness, and then consciousness is everything, and quantum physics, consciousness, and all this kind of stuff. So I didn't, as I said, in 2012, I didn't know anything about consciousness. And so that's where I am right now, where I'm actually in a position now where I'm very doubtful that this is ET. I think that it's going to be a phenomena that whatever this, I call it the intelligence, whatever the intelligence is, it can manifest as whatever it wants. So it used to manifest as fairies and stuff like that. And most people in the UFO community really don't know that it's manifested numerous times in the UFO community differently. So it starts in 1890. There's, wooden ships and propellers and balloons, and they're floating around, these guys hanging off of ropes and stuff like this. And then it becomes the Foo Fighters, and then it becomes the Green Fireballs and the Adamski crafts, and then the Betty and Barney Hill crafts with the windows, and then the windows go away and there's no windows, and now it's orb. No, there was triangles, and now it's orbs, and it just keeps changing from one thing to another. And people sort of just assume that it's always been the same thing. And it's absolutely, I know for a fact, it's not been the same thing. And the beings themselves, if you actually check the beings, I've got a list of about 20 things that would make you think, no, there's something wrong with the ET thing. Because one of the things is that with the abduction, they used to do this thing was called the mind scan, where the grays would come and they'd come very close to your eyes and they'd look in your eyes. And then people like David Jacobs would say, "What are they doing?" "Oh, they're looking at what I was doing last Wednesday." It's almost like they could read your mind by looking in your eyes. And then he'd say, "Let me ask you a question for you. Is he breathing?" And the people go, "Nope, not breathing." And so the question is, well, if he's not breathing, then maybe he's not a biological being. And then I would always ask people, I say, "Hey, can I ask you a question? Was he wearing any clothes?" And they go, "No, I never thought of that. No, he wasn't wearing any clothes." I said, "Don't you think that was kind of weird? Never thought about it till now." And I said, "Do you have any sex organs?" "No." And then I said, "Do you have a belly button?" "No." "Do you have nipples?" "No." And then if you even look at the alien autopsy video that people say was hoax, if you look at that, you'll see it has no belly button and no nipples. Well, if they were going to hoax the thing, you think they would get it right. And they didn't get it right. And that indicates that may be an actual being that they had. And then you have the thing where a couple of the most significant ones are, I asked Betty Andreasen, who was she had her first encounter with beings in 46, and her husband had 46 as well. And I interviewed him about 10 years ago. So they're old grandparents now. And I said, "Betty, let me ask you a question. You saw this being in 1946, and he's been through it with your whole life, and now you're a little kid, and now you're an old grandmother. Did the alien ever get any older?" And then there's this long pause, and her husband says, "No, but aliens live a long time." And the aliens never get any older. You can ask them all, like anybody who's seen the alien their whole life, they ask them, "Did they ever get older?" And they go, "No, no, I never got any older." And then the other thing that is, if you see the free survey shows that if you take a look at the beings, 25% of people who've encountered non-human intelligence will say the being is with them in their last lifetime. And I say, if the being is with you in your last lifetime, there's something going on here that isn't ET. And so that's where I sort of am now, where it's sort of this whole physical thing is falling apart. And even where I go into quantum stuff, where if you take a look at the basis, you can go to an AI. Anybody who's listening can go to AI and say, "What is primary? Is it fields or is it particles?" And AI will say fields are primary. That particles, that atoms and electrons, or electrons and protons and neutrons aren't even particles. They're fields inside of fields. And it's all fields, it's all vibration, it's all these sort of things. And there's 17 different fields. And then if you take consciousness as a field, an overriding field of all of them, then you have 18. So the thing is, it's these fields, and then the particles appear, and then when somebody observes them, and then it becomes a matter, and we sort of take it as matter. We've got it all backwards. And in order to, I think, to understand that what's actually going on, you got to start from the beginning, and you got to realize, how does the world actually work? It's not made out of matter, and that if it's made out of fields, these beings know what's going on. Because if you take a look at, you talk to people who've been uh, in this situation, they'll say 40% of them will say at one point during their experience with the beings, they knew the answer to everything in the universe, which indicates that the beings gave them the answer to everything in the universe, opened this thing up, that you can get access to everything. So if they gave access to the people, and the people weren't allowed to bring it back, but if they gave you access to everything in the universe, that means that the beings have access to everything in the universe, which means they're not here to check the soil. They're not here to do this kind of stuff. They know everything. That's not what they're here for. They're doing something quite different. So I see it completely different. In 75, to me, it was very simple. It's probably extraterrestrial. And now I sort of look at it as sort of a more of a consciousness thing where they're appearing. They can come as whatever beings they want. They can manifest as whatever they want. And we are sort of in this illusionary world where we figure it's all nuts and bolts, and we're trying to get technology because we want to make money, and we want to build weapons, and we want to kill people faster and stuff like that. When in fact, this is all signaling, and I call it the theory of wow. So I say, like in the first one, this thing, this very important thing, the second night I saw it when it was flying away, and I said, "What's it doing?" And the whole, so I came up with this what I call the theory of wow, where they ain't doing anything. They're just here. They just want you to go, what the heck is going on? Like I did the second night. Or you see a crop circle and you go, is that hoaxers or not? Whatever it is, how did they do that? And the cattle mutilation. What is a cat? What I look at this cattle mutilation. This is so gross. Like, what are they doing? And what they want you to do is they want you to go, wow, what's going on? They want you to realize, hey, there's something wrong here. So if we believed all the stuff we believe, this couldn't be happening. But it is happening, which means there's something that we believe that's wrong. And that's what they're trying to get you to is realize the world is not the way you think it is, and to think beyond the ordinary world. And they're leading us down the road to realize the world is much more complex. It's much less physical than you think it is. It's much more spiritual than you think it is. And that's basically the bottom line that I've come to now. So most of what I do now is this what I call this search for the nature of reality. How does reality work, and how does this fit into it?
And that's a really good question, is what is reality and above consciousness? And so I was just thinking, just the other day I put out that we are consciousness experiencing itself through the human body, of course. And
Yeah.
so tell me what you think about the human consciousness, the consciousness field, right? And that collapse into that human experience. And since there is that effect that, well, everything already exists in the field, we just have to align to it, right?
Mhm.
So if we're here by what we call contract, what is this matrix? What is this field? And so what have you come to so far in that stage of your research?
Okay, one of the things I hated at university, I had one of the highest marks in English in grade 12, and I actually failed first year university because it was all Shakespeare, and I hated Shakespeare. I just absolutely hate. I'm like, why don't they just speak English? This is nonsense, all this stupid talk. And now I quote it all the time. All the world's a stage. All the men and women are but actors. They have their entrances and exits, and each man plays many roles. That we are actually etheric beings. I did 27 high dose psilocybin experiences. I wrote a book on it, and in there, I had this whole deal where um, they went after me for my ego, and then I had this one experience where I'm listening to this Indian song there, and I'm singing along to this Indian song that's on there, and all of a sudden, sort of a voice comes to me, or a message comes to me, and in the end, I couldn't even remember. I never saw anybody, and I don't know if it's like it's actual voice or just something came in my head, and it said, "Don't you remember who you actually are?" And I go, what? Am I Shiva? Am I an Indian god? Or what am I? Like, I couldn't figure it out. And then I thought, no, it was this idea. Remember who you actually are. You're an etheric being. You're a spark of the divine. We are actually God. We are sparks of God. So we are like in the Bible says you're created in the image of God. So we are spirit, and we are here to learn lessons. That kind of throws me now because you'll hear these different versions of the story that they're here to learn lessons. And if you've seen the channeling done by Desta Barnaby, she had an argument with him, and they said, no, 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 that's not about you. It's just you're just here to live a life. It just it really doesn't mean anything. You just live this life, and then you go on to another life, and you're just living lives and this sort of thing. So I still go to the contract thing that you brought up. That that's where I sort of outlined to people at the end that whatever's going on, you in terms of reality, you got to realize, and that's where my religious thing came in. Where do you come from? Where are you going to go? And I'm a big fan of Michael Newton, which I saw. That was one of the big things that in my life. I saw Michael Newton lecture at UFO World Congress, and he had done 7,000 regressions with people and taken them into the spirit world, and he was famous for this life between lives. And I studied him. I was just obsessed. I couldn't think for 2 days after I saw him lecture, and I went, "Wow, this is it's like instinctive. This is how it works. This is how this operation works." And his whole thing was that when you leave the world, you go in front of a council. And I've heard some weird stories. I was actually talking to Mike Clellan this morning, but about these councils that people will talk about being in front of the Galactic Council. Michael Newton talked about being in front of these elders who ask you only one question. You're sitting there and you're in this sort of in front of them, and your spirit guide stands behind you on your left side, and they ask you one question: How did it work out? How did it work out, Melanie? And you can't say Hillary Clinton, the mother-in-law, the dog ate the homework because they're going to go time out, time out. It's not about them. This is about you. You planned this. How did it work out? And he said, everybody says the same thing. I could have done better. And so all we have to do is worry about is not what's going around in the world, what other people are doing. What we've got to worry about is where did I come from? Where am I going? And when I leave the world, I'm going to be asked one question. How did it work out? Because I planned it. So what did I plan? What am I doing here? What am I supposed to be doing? And am I doing it? And it really doesn't matter what anybody else is doing, whether they're doing it or not doing it. It comes down to what am I doing? So I'm more into that idea about the soul contract, where we come in to do certain things. And then you get the synchronicities where I'll always talk to people and say, maybe you and I, we had a meeting before we were born, and you said, well, I'm going to do podcasts, and we're going to have this podcast, and we're gonna, have a couple of sessions, and we're going to meet up, and we're all working together as a team, because that's basically what reality comes down to, is separation versus oneness. Is if you're in separation, then it's like a football team. That you have a football team, like a Super Bowl is this week, and so you have a situation where if you get into a huddle and one guy says, block? You want me to block? Are you kidding? I'm running for a pass. Don't tell me what to do. I'm independent. You can't tell me what to do. And if you have that situation where everybody in the huddle does whatever they want to do, that's game over. That's like a cell. That's what a cancer cell is. A cancer cell is a cell that separates from the rest and believes it's now a lone cancer cell, and everything outside it is now just environment. As long as you're a part of the thing, and they've actually got tests, Michael Levine, if you've ever watched his material, they've actually got this thing where they can actually send a biological signal to a cell that is separated in a cancer thing, and it will go back into the cell, and everything will go back to normal because it suddenly realizes it's part of another system. And that's what it is. We are like the cells are part of the whole that makes the body, and the bodies are part of the whole that makes the universe, and that's how it all works. And when you're in separation, things fall apart. And when you realize, as they said to me, remember who you actually are. As part of God, you're the spark of the divine, and you're here, and you're working together with everybody else to make this thing work. So this oneness principle is everything. Even I define, because people will say there's evil, there's good aliens and bad aliens. I say garbage is good aliens, bad. Like I said, if once they drop the atomic bomb, then you can tell me they're bad. But until then, there's good and bad, we're the bad guys. I mean, and it's this idea. I say All that's considered to be evil in the modern world is created by one thing and one thing only, the mistaken belief in separation. Or if you get the Chandler, who I listen to lots, and I'm going to forget his name here, um, Paul Selleck. Paul Selleck, the way he describes it is separation from the divine. He said, whatsoever and whosoever you take and separate from the divine and put into darkness, that same thing or person will drag you into the darkness because of co-resonance. You will resonate with whatever you're putting into the darkness, and whatever you damn damns you back. Whatever you bless will bless you in return. To say that I'm divine and you are not is nothing more than the shadow pretending to be the light. So it's this whole idea about separation and oneness, that it's all one thing, and we're here to learn lessons, I believe, and plus to enjoy the world, to get it. Like people will say to me, "Oh, I'm getting off the karmic wheel." I mean, Desta told me, lots of people told me that, getting off the karmic wheel. I said, "What do you mean getting off the karmic wheel? Like, what are you gonna do? Like, I mean, you're gonna go sit on a beach in Hawaii and drink Mai Tais? How many billion years do you think you can sit on a beach in Hawaii and drink Mai Tais before you get bored? Like, come on, this is what it's about. It's about sort of enjoying, and that this is this up and down a roller coaster, or the if you've ever seen Paul, no, Hicks, this is his last name. He's talking about the ride. It's called The Ride. And it's so funny. It's about 2 minutes long, but it's so funny. He said, "Life is like a ride. You get on and you can't get off, and you go up and down and round and round." And it's just, and then suddenly you go, "Hey, this is just a ride." And then they say, "No, you can't say that. We spent lots of money on the ride. You can't say that. It's just a ride." And it's true. It's just sort of like a ride, and you sort of enjoy it, and you realize that you are part. And once you realize that, and you calm down about what's going on, and you don't go into the past, which is depression, or into the future, which is anxiety. You stay in the present moment, and you realize that it's all going to work out, that you have multiple lives, and that you can be calm, and you can live the life you want. Just to remember that the two things that they showed me, and I'm not sure how much it has to do with UFOs, but in the this 27 high dose sessions, I don't remember that much, but I remember specifically compassion, which is another thing. A lot of the things I learned in the UFO field are things that I didn't know existed. And one was a compassion meditation, and they didn't tell me how to do it. They took me through it. And what it was, I remember the one, it was at least maybe 3 times they did this. And the one was where I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, it's like when somebody's going to die, and you're sitting there and you're praying, "Oh, I hope we can save them." And people are doing all sorts of things to try to help them, and give them energy and stuff like that. And you go, there's hope, there's hope. And then there's that second where, boom, the person takes their last breath, and they go, "Oh my God, they died. It didn't work. They died." They just like that thing. And that's what I felt, was this, that somebody, that happening to them. And then another person, another person, another person, another, and all these as these people were dying, and the pain around those people that were dying, that people were, upset and stuff like that. And it was like, then it was like thousands and millions of people. And then suddenly it actually felt very good. Not because I could feel their pain, but I actually felt like I can't do anything, but I'm actually compassionate to these people. I'm actually part of them, and they know I'm part of them, and I can't do anything, but I'm compassionate to what you're doing. And so there was that situation. And the other one they took me through was a gratitude meditation. And compassion meditation and gratitude, I didn't realize there was actual compassion meditations and gratitude meditations. And the gratitude one that now I try to do every morning is the when I'd be sitting there, and I'd be in this psychedelic thing, and I'd be sitting there, I'm going, "Hey, wonder where that gratitude guy is." Because what would happen is I'd be standing there, and all of a sudden it would be like somebody pouring honey over you, and it would be just going down. And as it went down you, you'd feel this gratitude. And I'd be sitting there, and I would tape them. Desta may still have some of the tapes. And I'd be taping this, and I'd be swearing. I'd go, I'm the luckiest guy that ever lived. And it was just like this total gratitude for everything. And I'd be sort of yelling and all excited and stuff like that. And then I'd be in the session, and I'd go, "Hey, where's the gratitude man? Where's the gratitude guy? I haven't seen him yet." And then all of a sudden, "Oh, here it comes." And you feel this gratitude coming over you. And those are the kind of things that I sort of learned, that I try to get across to people, is this idea of things that in Eastern traditions, I guess, they had all this stuff down. They couldn't build cell phones, but they understood basically the worldview that we are now adopting. This idea that it's Maya, everything's vibration. There is no particles. It's all vibration. It's all there's no colors. There's no everything is space. There's no time. There's no space. There's no solid stuff. It's all just space, 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 and everything is within you, which I learned from the people that have flown the craft, which really amazed me because what they told me, and I actually heard this morning in a who was talking about? They were talking about, oh, it was the guy from Ions, the guy head of Ions. He was talking about these guys that can do these really Indian guys that can do all these sort of really high-end magical type stuff. And he said he asked the one guy, he was doing one of his experiments. He said, "So where did you go? Where did you go to like the dual slit experiment where he's got to make this go through the one slit or not go through the slit and stuff like that?" And he said, "I didn't go anywhere. I went inside myself. You don't go anywhere. It's inside you." And that's what Stephen Greer had said, the Sufi expression. You see yourself as a puny form when within you is enfolded the entire universe. And then I realized that this is all true when I'm talking to people who've flown the craft. And they would say, I put my hand on this panel. Oh, Ron Johnson was the one. He's a Mormon guy. And he's been near death for a number of years, but he said he was there and they said, "Ron, where would you like to go?" And he said, "I'd like to see the Milky Way from a distance." And they said, "Okay, Ron, it is within you. Go within yourself. When you can imagine it, then we'll go there." And he said it was 1 second. He imagined it 1 second. He said, boom, the window opened and there's a Milky Way. And another woman, same thing. She said, they told her, it's within you. Go within yourself when you can imagine it. And that's when you start to realize that maybe there is no out there, out there. That's what Jim Semivan, the CIA guy, says. There does not appear to be any there. And when I interview people or talking to people, I say, so you tell me, what Jim Semivan got a 7-hour UFO briefing, and he said there was nothing about UFOs. They hadn't figured out anything about UFOs. It was all the psi stuff. And he said, I couldn't believe it. He said, for 3 months I walked around in the daze because they said it's all real. All the psi stuff is real. And that's what that's this whole his whole thing was. He said there does not appear to be any there. And I say to people, so what's Jim Semivan mean when he says there does not appear to be any there? And he says the story is indigestible. He said half the people in the United States can't read are reading at a grade 6 level. And he said, you're going to drop this on them. And I think what the indigestible thing is that it's not what you think it is. The world is all like it's all waves and it's all Maya and it's all illusion. And you're creating this thing in your head. And it's this whole idea that we have so many bad assumptions about how the world works. That's why we can't figure out the UFO thing because we're busy looking at lights in the sky and believing that there's this little physical thing that's going to come down. We're going to grab the engine and we're going to have free energy forever and stuff like that. And that we've got this illusion going on. And I think it's my part of my mission and my role is to break that illusion that it's a physical world when it's not a physical world. In fact, I'll tell you the experiment before I forget. We're doing an experiment now, and I wanted to do this for many years, and it just never worked out until now. And what it was Jay-Z Knight, who everybody says, "Oh, she's a cult leader, and she made all this money, and all these people." And it's like, oh, whatever, like lots of people in the United States make money, and I mean, she's got this big compound in the middle of nowhere in Washington. She said, "If I ever want, if I was going to be famous, would think this is where I would want to go in the middle of nowhere in Washington State." And she did an experiment where she was told by Ramtha, and goes completely contrary to what you'll hear in science today. And I had a biologist or a DNA expert friend of mine, parapsychology guy, said to me, "No, Grant, let me explain to you how it works." I said, "No, I know what you're going to say. I know this is going to work." And what it is Ramtha, who she channeled, said this whole idea that everything is consciousness and that the mind controls the DNA, not the other way around. That we have the idea that the DNA creates the physical, which creates this epiphenomena of consciousness. And he said, no, the mind controls the DNA. And he said, if you channel, so she's channeling Ramtha, and she goes into a trance state. So she's not even there. She just goes into this other world, and then Ramtha goes into her body. And so what they do is Ramtha tells her to do this test. So she takes her DNA when she's normal, and it's female French. And then she channels and she leaves her body, and Ramtha comes in and they do her DNA while she's channeling. And it's male, Icelandic, Native American. And so then everybody says, well, she had three different labs. They took this to three different labs. And they said, no, well, no, of course, she hoaxed it. And I said, well, yeah, maybe she hoaxed it. Yeah. But if she didn't hoax it, we can probably do this again. So I've been looking for a trans channeler. I'm looking for a person with multiple personality disorder. There you go. But the one we found was one that if you want to go look up neurodiversity, new thinking aloud. So and I was just talking to him the other day. He's still recovering from his knee operation. Is Jeffrey Mishlove, and I said, Jeffrey, I'm indebted to you for life for finding this couple. And what it is it's a guy who is 22 years old. He's engaged. His fiance gets pregnant, and then they lose the child, and it hasn't been born yet. So the child dies. And at that moment, the spirit of the child goes into him and it starts to grow. And he realizes something's going on, and there's just somebody inside me, and he goes for psychiatric tests and stuff like this. And as she gets older and older and older, then suddenly he realizes that it's actually his daughter. And so he says, "Okay, I'll give you the body. You're young, you've got a whole life in front of you, and I'll just die, and you can have the body." So in 2016, he leaves the body. And he leaves her a tape on December the 12th, 2016, and says to her, so she always says that's my birthday. So he leaves the body and she gets the body. So she changes from a man to a woman. And she takes all the hormones and all this kind of stuff and whatever. And 2021, she's doing psychedelics. And suddenly he comes back. Suddenly she picks him up again and he comes back. So now they're in this situation where she's like, she's 17 now. So what she'd been then, whatever, 13 or whatever. So they're actually talking back and forth. And so you have two souls in the same body. Now that's different than, say, somebody who's like a walk-in, because a walk-in will come in, but they can't leave the body. So they come in and they take over the body, but then they're stuck in the body. And the thing is, these people can leave the body. They can. So what happened is last Friday, he left the body Friday night and he goes into this meditative state. I said, go to Hawaii and sit on the beach and meditate and Sunday we do the test. So he's gone from Friday to Sunday. And the idea is that she's got to be in control of the body when we do the test. I want to make sure that she's running the feet because if there's any part of your body that's still there, that's why you need a pure trance channel rather than a relay channel. Because if you're relay channeling, you're still in your body. You're just relaying messages from somewhere. If you got to be able to leave the body, and then the voice changes, and they go back and forth. And if you watch this neurodiversity, Jeffrey Mishlove does 6 shows with them, and it is just so bizarre. Man, woman, man, woman. And I said to Jeff, I can tell just by watching the video. I can turn the sound off. I can tell you whether it's him or her. Because women, people don't realize this. Women, when they talk, their top teeth show. Like I always wondered, like, how can women get their mouths so open that all their teeth are, like you're doing right now, all the teeth are showing. When a guy is talking, a guy will talk like down. He's talking, just his mouth is just closed and he's just talking like this. So when she's talking, I can tell if it's her or him just by the fact that she's got her mouth open. So the thing is, so they did this thing now this Friday. He's going to leave. She's going to leave the body, and then Sunday we're going to do the test. Now, he was skeptical, and that's always the way it works. Men are very skeptical because it's left brain. Left brain is I call it what's called the um, left brain interpreter. And it's a thing inside the left brain that makes up stuff. So when the world becomes inconsistent, when there's something doesn't make sense, there's a thing in your left brain that will just make up a story. And it'll make the story consistent. You go, oh, it's just a balloon. That people thought it was a UFO. It's just a balloon. Okay, everything's okay. We'll go back to living our world. But because the world doesn't want to, the body doesn't want to live with this inconsistency as to what's going on. And so he was skeptical and he said, well, no. And I said, well, let's do the test. I mean, JC Knight, it's going to cost a couple $100. I'll pay for the test and let's do the test and let's see what happens. So they agreed to do it. So we're going to do the other one. And he did a test when he realized there's something inside his body, when there was something was going on. He did a test in 2013. So I said, well, number one, we can compare your DNA to 2013 to see how accurate this is, because people always figure this stuff's not accurate. And we're using Ancestry. And I said, that's exactly what you want to use. You don't want to use a private lab because you don't want them to, you have to explain what you're doing. You just put it through 23, they don't care. 23andMe or Ancestry, they don't care. It's just a number. They just do the test and give you the results or whatever. And so what's going to happen is if it works like JZ Knight, his is going to come back the same as his 2013 DNA, and hers is going to come back as a female. And it's game over. That's two white crows. That is the word. How do you explain that? And the other thing is, I said to them, I said, not only that, we know who her mother is. Her mother, if her mother's DNA comes up on her DNA, how do you explain that? Or her mother's relatives all come up, because you know with the DNA test, they'll show your first cousin and your brothers and sisters. If they all come up, how do you explain that? This is going to be like almost absolute proof that there is a soul. That because these people can move in and out, and they can sort of share the body, and you'll see her talking, looking over at him and stuff like this. It's just so bizarre. It's called, if you look at a New Thinking Aloud Diversity, you got to watch these videos of them talking, and they're talking. So what I want to do, I'm going to do an interview, and I'm going to get them to talk, go 1 to 20, and it's going to go man, woman, man, woman, man, woman, and the voices are completely different, absolutely completely different, and go through this whole thing about how this worked. Now maybe it's not going to work, but I said to them, even if it doesn't work, it's the old thing about Michael Newton. When you leave the world, they're going to say, how did it work out? And I would hate to be in a situation where I say, I was going to do that test, but I didn't know. I thought, well, it wouldn't work. I have to pay for it and stuff like that. I just don't want to have that. I want to be sure that I close that door, that I actually tried to do it, and it took me 5 years to find someone. Bashar had agreed to do it. The Chandler had agreed. Kai Muga, who's a very famous physical medium in Germany, had agreed to do it. I had a woman in England that had agreed to do it, and then got upset at me. And then she was a spirit painter, where she would just sort of go into a coma type thing, and her hand would go. And Leonardo da Vinci, actually, she paints dead people, so she painted this one. She painted this girl, and then what happened was. I couldn't, I took it to my sisters and my mother and everything, and they just looked at her and they said, nah, nobody in our family. And so I made this joke on Facebook, and they didn't have much of a sense of humor. I put this joke on Facebook. I said, the day I die, this woman's going to come back and she's going to be crying, and she's going to go, you didn't remember who I was. How could you forget me? And then they said, oh, she's making fun of you. Grant's making fun of you. I said, no, I'm not. It's a joke. Come on. And so she was going to do it. She would have been good, because she claimed that Leonardo da Vinci painted that, and that he paints through her. And there's a fair bit of evidence to prove that that may be true. And that's what I was looking for. So once we get this, then it'll be open season for trans channelers. And the other thing is you can tell whether a person is actually trans channeling, or whether they're channeling, because this is going to sort of give evidence as to whether you're able to dissociate. And that, again, that's what it comes down to. We wrote the Contact Modalities, is the whole idea that almost all the modalities are the ability to dissociate. So you'd have situations where people have trauma, like a lot of, there's a study done on Brazilian mediums, and I think it was 16 out of 18 had childhood abuse issues. And it's the old idea that you're trying to shut out the world, and all of a sudden you're suddenly talking to your dead grandmother. And I remember I was with Sid Goldberg one time in Toronto, and from Gaia TV. And he said, we're in the bar there and we're talking. I said, Sid, most of the people who are paranormal or psychic or whatever, they have some sort of trauma. They have a near-death experience, like the UFO people. 37% of UFO experiencers have had a near-death experience. And I say it's this trauma thing. And he said, no, no, I don't think so. I said, yeah, Sid, I'm sure of it. There's this trauma event that takes place. And like with this guy, when she went into the body, That's what he was holding his fiance. They were standing on a stairway, and she was crying because they'd lost the baby. And it was that moment of the trauma. That's when she went into the body. So Sid was saying, no, no, no. And then this girl, her name is Osi. She's a medium out of Toronto, Canada. And Osi comes up and she's showing these photographs to Sid. And Sid doesn't think it's a UFO. It's a bizarre thing. But anyway, so then I said to her, I said, Osi, you're a medium? She said, yeah, you're a good medium? Yeah, I'm a good medium. And I said, Osi, can I ask you a private question? She says, sure. So what was your childhood like? And she goes, oh, it was terrible. I had physical abuse, psychological abuse. It was everything. It was terrible. And then said to Sid, I told you, Sid. And then he goes, and then next, and another experiencer walks into the bar. And he says, ask him. Ask him now. He sort of got into it, this idea, and that's what it is. It's just like that's what you're doing when you're doing meditation. You're trying to shut down that left brain ego, the thing that's creating the noise and the signal, and you're saying, count your breaths, and then the ego says, oh, I'm the best breath counter ever. And after about 3 seconds, it goes, I'm tired of this. I'm going to go do something else. And you go, no, no, count the breaths, and you make it go back, and you keep hammering it until it suddenly says, I'm out of here, and it surrenders. And as soon as the ego surrenders, that's what happened when I was doing the psychedelics. Is they put me in these hell situations a couple of times where I said, oh my goodness, what have I done? This stuff's going on and I can't stop it and stuff like that. And then I just said, okay, that's the way it's going to be. I took it. I took the drug. Can't blame anybody else but myself. This is the way it's going to be. I'm going to live in hell forever. This is the way it's going to be. And I surrendered. And then suddenly, boom, it's over. And I'm in the almost like an exalted state. And then I said to myself, hey, I know what to do. Next time when they do that to me, I'm just going to say I surrender and I'm going to get out. And then they do it again, but they can make you forget that it happened before, and you go through the same thing again. And it's just amazing that to me, it's like you realize how complex the world is, how magnificent the world is. And the more I look, the same as when you look into the stars, the more and more you look, the bigger it gets, the more magnificent, the more complex it gets. The same as you look in the quantum level, it gets more complex. And that's what happens with the UFO for 50 years. I've looked at it over and over. I spent basically full time for 50 years, and it just gets more complex and more complex and more complex and grander and more magnificent. And almost like they told me with my ego when I was doing the psychedelics, they kept saying to me, you think you know everything? You think you understand how everything works? You haven't got a clue what's going on. And then they would do it the same thing. And after about 3 or 4 sessions like that, where I'd go in and they would start hammering me on my ego, and you haven't got a clue. You think you have it all understood. You haven't got a clue what's going on. And then I got upset the one time and I said, okay. I didn't come here to be abused. I just came, I called it the psilocybin school. I just said, okay, I'm here to learn. What do I need to learn? I didn't want to ask anything. I just, what do I need to learn? And they gave me these lessons were very clear when started. The first 6 sessions were clear lessons. I knew exactly what the lesson was after about 5 minutes. And then I said, I didn't come here. Like, okay, so you tell me what the hell's going on? And this voice says, we don't know either. And I go, oh yeah, sure, come on. It's like we don't know either. It's just like so. I've had these experiences, whether it's psychedelics or whether it's the UFO experience, and then I started getting into the psychics and having been around Desta and watching her, and I have a number of channelers that I follow that channel, and then I'll compare them. I'll say, okay, Desta, here, this is what Margie says. What channel and see what you get it for an answer and compare the answers. And I actually have a book that's coming up that's on a. I didn't realize it. I didn't realize this guy existed. His name is Andrew Jackson Davis. He was a trans-channel from 1847. So he published his first book. It was all channeled. He had a guy that put him under hypnosis. That's when hypnosis began, and put him under hypnosis. And he started to relate all this stuff. And the guy wrote it all down. They put it in a book. And so I wrote a book on him. And then what I did is I took, because now you can do this through AI. I took all his books. He wrote 30 books, and I took the 39 major things that he talked about, that he believed that he's talking about in these channeling sessions, and I compared them to Bashar, to Seth, to Desta, to Abraham, to Paul Selleck, all these different channelers, the law of one, and like 100%, like 99, 98% agreement on all that kind of stuff. The one difference was that Davis didn't believe in reincarnation, and all the others believe in reincarnation. But other than that, I mean, it was astounding. And so people have this idea that if you're getting material from the field, you're making it up, and anybody can make that stuff up. And I always say, I have my $1,000 bet. I said, you think you can channel? And I'll give you the test. $1,000. You put $1,000 and you're going to lose your $1,000. Because if you've ever watched Paul Selleck channel, he does half a sentence, he whispers, repeats, whispers, repeats, whispers, repeats, half a sentence at a time. And he basically was mad. He said, like, what do you make? You make me look stupid. Like, what have I got to do this stupid whisper and repeat thing? And I think the reason they do it is they want you to go almost like a crop circle. It's like, how the hell does he do that? I mean, whether he's making it up or not, how you do that? How can you whisper and repeat half a sentence and keep consistent? And he's done 13 books, and there's only 2 edits per book. And that's what I found out with channelers. That's the other thing I can check with channelers is when you channel, like when I talk, I go, yeah, and what, and none. A trance channeler will never string things together. It's all consistent, and that's the thing. Only in 2 occasions will they ever pull a word or change it. And he said usually it's some word that he mispronounces because he's going quickly. He mispronounces it. Other than that, he's got 13 books with no edits in them. And you tell me anybody can do 13 books with no edits? That's unbelievable.
Absolutely. No, you're right. And thank you for sharing how multiple energies can come into the body. I
Mhm,
think that's really important to see and understand and know. And I was just speaking about that yesterday, how souls can come into our body to experience life
mhm,
and they can leave the body just as easily. And so the same is with the trance channeling, since we're kind of on this topic. When I go into trance, it's, within 10 seconds or less, I'm out of the
mhm,
body. And I feel that depending on which being is coming through, the energy can be subtle. But if I'm channeling, say, Anubis, then that energy is going to come through a lot more strong and
mhm,
aggressive.
mhm,
And it's interesting because people have mentioned how they see my face shape shifting when I
mhm.
do channel Anubis. And so I also want to comment on that channeling I'm doing because of the bioelectricity that's coming through to me as a conduit to affect and address other people's DNA blueprints and not contracts, but their constructs and their programming.
Mhm.
And so, can you give a little bit of your feedback on that? What is happening, and how is it that it can change the blueprint of someone else in that manner?
Well, I guess we'll go back to the Ramtha thing where he says we've got it backwards. We believe that the brain is creating this stuff and it's putting it out, when in fact it's almost like the soul. So you have the body, and they even talked about this. They said they asked him, "What happens if both of you leave the body at the same time?" And he said the body collapses. That you need the body, and then that's why I said to them. They said, "What do you want for protocol?" I said, "The only protocol I want is I want to make sh absolutely sure that you are the person in control of the body." Because they'll talk about when they come back into the body, like he said, when he came back into the body after being gone for 5 years, he said he was totally disoriented. He didn't know what was going on. He had a hard time working the body. And they all talked about this. So I said to her, and you'll see this tape, we taped this. I said to her, well, what, it's kind of funny. I said, so what's it like without Tristan here? He says, fantastic. I can do whatever I want. She says, and it's like it's sort of like you're in a sleeping bag with somebody, and then suddenly you got the whole bed to yourself. And it's like well, poor old Tristan, he gets back, he hears that, he's gonna go like, I'm gonna leave again, like because and I said you can eat everything you want because that's the thing is he's allergic to seafood and he's got asthma. He's allergic to seafood, and she says, "I can eat whatever I said, "You can eat seafood." She says, "Yeah, I can eat whatever I want because he can't eat seafood. He's allergic to it." And so it's the body. The body is just a vehicle. So the beings that they come in will animate the entire body, and that's where she says, like when we're both in the body. sometimes I can't feel one hand, I can't feel the whole body or whatever, or his voice is going, he's talking or whatever in my head, and I can't sort of shut his voice off and stuff like that. So they're sharing and they're having this trouble. They even said that they had problems with that they got choking devices in each room. Because when the person comes back into the body, if the person is eating and the other person comes in and makes a joke, they'll choke. And they've choked, they almost died a few times because it's coordinating the body between the two of them, which one's running the body. So they both are there at the same time, but it's very hard to be in the same body. And they said they had lots of fights. And I said, I give you guys credit because if you have like a situation where you're in a marriage or whatever and things aren't going very well, you can walk away. These people can't walk away. They're stuck for life. And I mean, you absolutely learn to work together in terms of operating this body. So that's what I see is the body's just a vehicle, and the beings can come in and animate the body and work the body, and you'll see things like changes. And that's what I wanted to do, but we didn't do when he was out of the body, is to photograph the eyes because you hear that in multiple personality disorder, which is called DID now. But multiple personality disorders where one person will be allergic to something, one will have a heart condition, one will be blind, the other one's not blind, and they actually do the tests on the brain and they see that the visual cortex is not lighting up and stuff like that. And the main one is the eye color. And science will say, well, no, no, the eye color didn't change. No, it's just you're looking at it from a different angle and you're misinterpreting and stuff like that. And it's like, no, 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 the eye color is changing. And that's the whole thing. That's DNA. So if your face is changing or your things are changing, that's DNA. That's a different DNA. So it's even Paul Selig says that when he says, and I don't think he even realizes what's going on. He says, when I channel, people tell me my eyes are bright blue. They change from brown to bright blue. And then I'm thinking to myself, oh, I know, there's this thing, there's another being inside him. And then he was asked one time, have you ever met your spirit guide? And then he says, only a couple times. He's got this big tall hat on, but he's got these bright blue eyes. And I go, I knew it. It's like as soon as he said, I knew it. It's his soul guide, it's coming in when they're channeling, and that's the whole thing. So it can take over the body, and you'll get these DNA changes where people will exhibit different characteristics. Or Paul Selig says when he doesn't do dead people, but he does live people where he can talk to you and your mother, and you and your mother are having a fight, and he can go into your mother's head and tell you what your mother actually thinks and stuff like that. And he said at that point that people go, you actually look like my mother. You're starting to look like my mother. And the facial expressions are changing because he's taking on that consciousness, and that consciousness animates the body. So it'll change things. And like Jay-Z Knight, when she was channeling Ramtha, she would gain 15 to 20 pounds of water. And when she was channeling Ramtha, she doesn't drink. She could drink 7 bottles of wine while she was channeling in an afternoon and not get drunk because Rapta was a huge guy that drank all the time and stuff like that. And so you see these kind of things that indicate to me that whether this test works or not, this is the way I think we got to go. We've got to, and it's hard to determine. This is the best example I can think of because they can actually separately leave the body, or you can actually assure that the one person's in the body and the other person's outside the body. Otherwise, how would you test it? It's very hard to test. You can watch them talk, and it's very clear that one is a guy and one's a girl, very clear. And she's laughing, and he never laughs, and when she's got long hair. So when she pushes her hair back, like a woman, you don't realize until you watch it very closely. She takes her hair and she flips it back. When the hair's in his way, he just pushes it back, and it's the same hair, but they treat it differently. Like a guy will just push his hair back, and the women are always flipping their hair, or they're playing with their hair and stuff like that. And so you see these very clear differences. But how do you prove it? Because science will just say, no, you're just imagining it or whatever. And this is something where it's going to be on paper. It's actually going to be on paper, and you describe this, especially if her mother's DNA comes up. There is no way you're ever going to explain that away. No way. And then they said, well, would the mother take a DNA? And they said, no, absolutely not. The mother is not going to be involved in this. And I said, okay, fine, but she'll still come up, or one of her relatives, if they've done DNA through that company, will come up there, and he'll recognize this is a relative of hers. And that's pretty strong evidence. And that's what sort of changes the world, is we start to realize the world is a spiritual world, because now if you take it science, and this is my next book, where you take a look at science the way it is now is with this Andrew Davis. This is 1847, and it was exactly he and that was a spiritual revolution that started. That was the spiritualism thing where all the mediums started, all the channeling started, and it was exactly the same year as the Communist Manifesto, which is the materialistic paradigm. That's when the materialistic paradigm started with the Communist Manifesto that opiated the people, the religion, and were just biological robots and all this kind of stuff. So you had these two sort of fighting it out, and you're going to be in a situation where we're going to flip from the materialistic paradigm, which is going on right now. Because if you take a look at the National Academy of Sciences, the top 2,000 scientists in the United States is 93% atheists. And so you have this situation where it's completely materialistic. The materialistic paradigm is running this thing, and therefore everything is an object. It's no, you and I would see as a verb. Everything's alive, everything's conscious, everything's one. It's a verb. There is no separation. As soon as you, as the Tao Te Ching says, the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. The nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. The Tao is the mother of 10,000 things. So the mother is the 10,000 things, but the Tao is a noun. Once you name it, once you put a name on it, that's what science does. It says this is a noun, this is a noun, this is a thing, a thing, a thing, a thing, and they're all inanimate, they're all not alive or whatever. Whereas we say there are no nouns. It's all just one moving, alive verb. That you're a different person now than you were. There's a million cells dying in your body every second, and these cells are being replaced. And you're not the same person every second. And it's just like it's just like this flowing thing where you're in this midst of this flowing environment, and we got to realize that. And once we can confirm that there is a soul, that if we can prove that, then the whole thing will flip back, where people will start to realize that this is an important concept. Because that's what happens in the UFO phenomena, is that you'll take a look, and experiencers are totally disregarded. We don't, they're anecdotal. We don't want to hear them. Don't bring up experiencers. Don't bring up abductions. Don't bring up any of that kind of stuff, because they don't want to hear it. We want to have weapons. We want to build. We want to get patents. We want to make some money or whatever. And it's a material world. It's just a random material world. And there's a little engine in this thing. And when you start talking to experiences, you realize, no, no, this craft is alive. Everybody says the same thing. You put your hand on a craft, on the inside of the craft. You become one with the craft, and whatever you think is what the craft does, you become symbiotic with the craft, and then you can manipulate the craft around. The craft is alive. It's grown. Everything is alive. Everything's conscious. Everything's one. And that's the bottom line of it. Whereas what we're being taught in science today is nothing's alive, nothing's conscious, and everything is completely separate from everything else. And that's exactly the opposite of what is actually going on.
Since we're on the topic of what's going on right now, I know there's a lot of duality of war and love. There's people that are waking up across the world right now, being triggered into that awakening state. So, what makes someone, what we call wake up? What makes someone be conscious and aware of themselves? And how does love come into play? I guess you could say love and duality, but since we are all consciousness and have the choice or free will, um, as you say, it can be kind of cancerous if, one bad apple could ruin the bunch. And so, how can love come into the play of now and that consciousness of and what triggers someone to wake up to that process?
The triggering, I think, is clearly trauma. It's the idea that, as I always said, God created pain for a reason. That people say we don't want any pain. Why did God create pain? And it's like, because when you break your leg, there's pain that tells you something's wrong. It's built into the system that it's telling you something's wrong, and that's where a lot of people wake up. But then a lot of people don't have to wake up, because everybody's at a different state. We sort of expect that everybody's supposed to fall in line with us, and we've got to realize everybody's at a different position, everybody's at a different state, and that a lot of the darkness is actually part of the plan. that, and you can't tell the light until you've seen the darkness. And it's this whole idea about the situation in the United States now is darkest before the dawn. This idea that it's waking people up. This is that you think it's actually killing everything, when in fact what's actually happening is we are at a situation where Paul Selig talks about that, where when you see the darkness, then you realize um, uh, the what the light is, and you can go towards the light. Or he says it's like the situation now, and he never made a prediction. This is the only prediction he made. He said in 2016, he said, you've wondered what it's like to have a table and there's salt and pepper on the table. What should I pick up, the salt or the pepper? He said the table is about to be turned upside down. And his impression of this, the way he describes it is, you cannot evolve until you realize what's going on. And what's happening now is the bodies are buried in the basement, and we are digging up the bodies. And until you take the dead bodies and you bring them into the light to be seen in a new way, you can't have. That's what we need. We're digging up the bad things, and we're bringing them into the light where people can see, like, oh, I can't believe we actually are doing this. We're actually doing that. I never thought this would come to this, and stuff like that, where people are waking up and they're starting to realize that there's another choice to be made. That we can make another choice. And so it's the idea that we've been we the spiritual people have been asleep. Or the idea of going to church. So we go to church for 1 hour a week, and we say our prayers, and we think, oh, that does it. We're going to go to heaven, and the rest of the week we're just doing whatever we want to do. And it's this sort of realization that the moving us away from this idea of materialism, that we're like a David Bohm talked about it. He said it is as if a swarm of locusts had descended upon the earth. That in this materialistic paradigm, it's basically rape, pillage, kill, and steal. Whoever's got the most toys when they die wins. And that's what we're doing. We're doing this sort of idea. And if you take a look at the Rua case, the Zimbabwe case with the young kids, there was two. There was one girl from Canada who's actually died. She died very young from cancer, but her name was Emily Trim. And if you go to her Instagram page, it's still up. You'll see all the drawings, all the alien writing, just pages and pages and pages. She was obsessed. She was putting this stuff on before she died. And she said the writing was the most important part. She was a painter. She would paint the aliens with the writing in the background and stuff. She said the writing was the most important part, but never really, nobody ever identified what the writing actually meant. And she tells the story about how um, they got the warning. So that's why the experience is so important, because you're never going to determine what's going on with UFOs by looking at lights in the sky. The only time you're going to determine what's actually going on is to talk to the people who are interacting with the intelligence. And those are the people that are being totally ignored. Do not let these people talk. Do not bring them into the public. And so we have this situation where Emily Trim and her friend were running along on the edge of the schoolyard, and they're on these logs were on the edge of the schoolyard, that there was a boundary of the schoolyard, and they were bouncing up and down on these logs. And she said suddenly there was a flash, and she sort of looked to the side, and this gray being was imitating them, because they were bouncing up and down. They were running on these logs, bouncing up and down, and this being is levitated, and he's bouncing up and down again. And she goes, "That's so weird. It's bouncing up and down." And she said, "Boom!" Suddenly it was right in front of her, and the stuff was coming out of the eyes. And she said it was like, and you're the healing, so I'll tell you this healing story. So she's doing this thing where she says there's these images, and they're flashing. And I tried to get an interview with her. And she had a handler who wouldn't let me get near her. Said, "Oh, she gets all upset or whatever when she talks about it." And I said, "Well, unless she talks about it, it's just going to get worse. Like, why are you protecting her? Like, all I want to know is one thing: how fast were the images flashing? Because I know what the images are." And so she said the images were flashing, and hers were technological images, so different technological images. And she said, in the end, the last one was this giant flash. And she said, it doesn't mean that the world's going to end. She didn't think it meant the world was going to end. But she said the message she got is, you got technology, but you could do better. And the other girl was getting environmental images. So she's getting all these environmental images. And the key to the whole story there is this idea that we are, destroying the world through belief in self, getting stuff for ourselves, not realizing there's 120 million people that don't have a place to live, don't have a country, they're wandering around the world and stuff like that. And so she had this messages were coming to her, but it was the rapid image cycling that get me because I said, I know what they're doing. What's happening with the rapid image cycling? The beings use this a number of times, and what they're doing is they're shutting down the ego. So what you're doing in meditation or hypnosis is you're talking to the left brain interpreter. You're talking to this little voice, this little ego that knows everything, that doesn't want to hear anything. I'm in charge here, and you want it to surrender. You want it to get lost. So what you do with rapid image cycling is you you shut it down with images. So the healing technique I took was called the Bankston healing. I don't know if you're familiar with it. So Bankston had gotten this thing from a psychic. I said to him, I said, "This you didn't invent this. This was Bennett Merrick that got this." He said, "Yeah, it's true, but talk to me at coffee time. I'll talk about it, whatever." But it was this Bennett Merrick, this psychic guy, and Bankston was a guy doing a sociology degree, and he was watching this guy because this guy could heal anything. You could heal people. You could identify just by in an envelope and you could tell what the person had in a hospital, what disease he was dying from without even looking at the person and stuff like that. So he said, "How do you do this kind of stuff?" And then he said, "Well, he teach me how to do this." Because he cured his back. And so Bennett talked to him about this thing where you take ego images. So they can't be images, I want to save the world, I want peace, love. No, none, you can't have those. It's going to be ego images. I want a motorhome. It's going to be 23 feet long. It's going to have captain's chairs in it. I'm going to have a blue car and it has this, system and all this. And you have to think more and more about all these different things. I'm going to go on a trip to this place and I'm going to go here and you image all this stuff and you just get these images and you get 20 of these ego images. And then what you do is you start to memorize them. So you memorize them, and he takes it from boom, 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 and you flip these images in your head, boop, 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 these different images that are all ego images. And then it goes faster and faster and faster. And they teach you how to flip these images at like a couple thousand images a second. You can flip these images and you're spinning them in your head. And what you're doing is the ego is going, "Hey, that's cool. Look at that motorhome." And it's looking at all these images and it sort of shuts down. It's like when you're hypnotizing somebody, you say, we understand, ego, you want to get involved, you want to help here, you think you know what's going on or whatever. Could you go for coffee for half an hour? We're busy here. We're going to do some stuff. And then you can come back and help or whatever. And that's what you're doing is shutting the left brain down. So that's what they're doing with these rapid images. And the same so that the Zimbabwe case with the school. That's what was happening there. They're shutting the image, they're flipping these images and it's going into your head. And the other one that told the story was Susie Hansen. So who's Susie Hansen is this big New Zealand experiencer who wrote two books on the Greys and what the Greys taught her and stuff like that. And she says, it was 2010. I think it was 2010, 2011. And they took us to this underground, looked like an underground theater. And there was 200 to 250 of us in the audience. And then she said, there's a being on there. And then he sort of walked off and there was a stage and a screen. And she said, all of a sudden, boom, there was an environmental image on the screen. Boom, 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 boom. And she said, suddenly there was over 100 a second. And they had taught us how to do it. And I said, that's Bankston. That's the Bankston method. It's that image that you just overflood the brain where the left brain is trying to keep up with this thing, and you dissociate, you surrender, and boom, you're in the field. Suddenly you're in the field. And what happened? And the being would come out, and he'd put his hand like this, and everybody would stop crying. She said there was people crying as these images were flashing on the screen, and they were crying and stuff like that. And he would just go like this, and everybody stopped crying, but the images were there into their head, and that's what they do to put these messages. You'll hear beings where they say the eyes, and they're downloading stuff, and this stuff is coming at a very rapid rate into their head through the being's eyes, and so that's how they sort of move these messages. And you start to see when you see these things, you start to realize that it's all the same thing. So we'll separate healing from UFOs, from all this kind of stuff. And when you start to see these crossovers with the rapid image cycling through three different modalities, you realize, hey, they're all using the same thing. It's this idea that it's all the same thing and the beings are coming in. So what Barbara Streisand's stepson said to me, he's a full-blown experiencer. He said what they told him was when we come into your world, we go into your head and we see what's in your head. And it is whatever's in your head, that's what we use to build a message for you, our lesson. We have no other choice. And the other one that talked about this was Yossi Ronan, who's an experiencer out of Israel, and he wrote a book called One. The ultimate message is one. And he said that they told him, when we come into your world, and his beings were green. They looked like grays, but they were completely green. And he said they said, we when we come into your world, we take on a body. We don't need to take on a body. We just need one to work in your world. You can do the same thing. You just don't know it. And this whole idea that all the world's a stage, all the men and women are actors. So you play this role and then you leave the world. Or Whitley Strieber, I always to Whitley, I said one of the best things you ever talked about was Anne comes back after she dies. Whitley Strieber's wife, she dies and she comes back and she says, Whitley, I am no longer Anne, but I'll always be Anne to you, which means I'm moving on. Playing another role now, but I'll always be Anne because I was Anne in your life. And that's how it works. So we're coming in and out of our costumes. Some people even claim that you can live two lives at the same time or multiple lives at the same time, and that we're doing certain things for entertainment, for enjoyment, to help others. I think that's, to me, whatever people say, you gotta do that main lesson is the idea that you've got to help the people. You have to have the compassion and for the other people, and you have to work as one, because the number one, 54% of all people who dealt with the non-human intelligence said the main message was oneness and love. Love is the basis of the universe. You hear this through all the modalities. That is the world is made out of love. That, near earth experience talk about this. This is the key thing, and that oneness, that when we work together, when everything works together, everything works fine. And when we don't, then we have to go through these lessons of separation that things happen, and all these things are happening, that somebody may even play a role where they'll do something like would seem to be bad in order to get you a lesson. This idea of karmic, where you did something to me, so I get to do something to you the next time, so you can learn to associate with how that feels and have compassion and all this sort of stuff. And so the stuff all fit together with the reincarnation stuff I'd learned early on with Edgar Casey. And when I was at university, I sort of gave up on university. I just want to take courses I enjoyed, and I took a death and dying course. So I've always been obsessed with death. So I took this death and dying course, and I did a paper which I never got back. It was a very 120-page paper that I wrote that's all you had to do is make one paper. And that was when the first near death experience book came out. So the same year that I got involved, the same year that Whitley Strieber got involved, not Whitley Strieber, Travis Walton, the same year that Linda Howe, the same year that Bud Hopkins got involved was 1975. And the time when Travis Walton was taken was exactly the day when they published the first near-death experience book. And that's key. The near-death experience thing is a big part of the awakening. So we're getting the awakening by the beings come in 1947 in great mass, and they start giving us lessons or whatever. And in the 1960s, there was a guy, and his name always escapes me. He's a Czechoslovakian guy, that we would not have near-death experience stuff today unless people died. So people say it's terrible that people have these near-death experiences. Well, no, they're teaching us. They're bringing back lessons. And this all came from one guy whose daughter died. She had asthma, really bad asthma, and she died going to the hospital. That they put her in the back of an ambulance or a police car, and they took her because there was no such thing as ambulances with equipment in them. And that's when he said, my daughter died, and he was an inventor type guy. So what he did was he built an ambulance with people who are trained in medicine, and they had equipment inside the ambulance to stabilize you. And that's when people started coming back from the dead. And the other thing that he built, he had that, and he also built trauma units, which is another thing that was where you get ready for the gunshot wounds where you don't have to gather all the people. There's a trauma unit. And the other thing he invented was blood where you cool the body down, and you cool then you do an operation, and then you take all the blood out and you put the blood back in. And there was a third thing. He had four different things that this same guy invented. And cardio, there was CPR. He was one of two guys who invented CPR. So CPR, ambulances, trauma units and the blood thing. And that's when we had all the near-death experiences, people being brought back from the dead. And so that's a bad thing. People are dying or whatever, but we bring them back from the dead, and they bring all these messages back because they're on the other side and they're able to bring messages. So we're in this awakening time where you have the UFO stuff, the near-death experience stuff, and all this kind of stuff. And people think this has always been happening, and people don't realize there was no ambulances with stuff in them before 1973. There was no people would put you in the back of, if you had a heart attack, they put you in the back of a police car and take you to the hospital, and nobody survived from a if your heart stopped before 1969 or 68, you died because they didn't know about how to get the heart started again. And that's the whole thing. So we see things differently. And if you look at the way we're looking at it, and then you get all the things where I can guarantee you that there was no real trans channeling. There was Seth, but it was really not known, the channeling stuff. And the other thing that happened was the light language. I said to me, when I first heard light language, women speaking light language, I went, that is the weirdest. There's no way that happened in 75. No way. And you start to see all these new things coming up where people are having new techniques and stuff like that. And it's like coming in. It's almost like we're at this period where we're about to flip. And you hear this from all it's a lot of the challenge that we're at this moment where things are going to flip. But I say it's not the disclosure because I believe the same as Jim Semivan. I don't think they have anything on UFOs. Yeah, they have bodies, they have crafts, but they have no clue what's going on because it's got to do with consciousness. That's how the craft works, and we don't have that part. So it's this consciousness that's going to shift, but the disclosure is going to be a consciousness disclosure. It's going to be a spiritual disclosure. That's what's going to happen. That's the part that's going to flip. The other part is going to weigh. And even the aliens had many years ago, I heard one channeler one UFO experiencer who had said they were warned by the beings, do not go down the technology route. It's a trap. And that's basically, so you have everybody trying to get the technology. Everybody, it's like we've got with the OSAP study, we had 250,000 sightings. And everybody says, oh, we need some sightings. We need some sightings, whatever. And it's like, what do you think? If you get 265,000, you're suddenly going to solve the thing? Come on. It's like you did this. What we're doing right now, we did in 1947. We get a UFO sighting, put a pin on a map. What color was it? How fast was it moving? All this sort of stuff. Was there anybody else that saw the same thing? Is there other witnesses? We get better cameras, better stuff, closer photographs and stuff, but it doesn't mean anything. It's yeah, it's real. Yeah, there's something going on. It's real. And that's what we're doing. We're sort of off in this material world trying to solve it, and we're never going to solve it because it's like 1947, you're doing the same thing over and over again. I mean, this definition of insanity to do the same thing over and over and over again, believing you're going to come to a different conclusion. As long as you keep doing the same thing all the time, you're not going to solve anything. It's in that you get the experiencer people who say, I'm getting a message from them, and because everybody wants to be Mr. Cool and nobody wants to be Rodney Dangerfield, and it's like I don't get any respect. Everybody goes, oh, I can't do the woo-woo consciousness thing. I need to do the nuts and bolts, anything that measured. I'm skeptical. And it's like skepticism is the left brain interpreter. That's all it is. When something happens that doesn't make any sense, the left brain interpreter makes up a story, and it's always wrong, always wrong. And that's what's happening. We're allowing the left brain to run the show and get us going down this road where we're really not getting anywhere. And we sort of think that, if we get better sightings and more sightings and stuff like that, and we just totally, like at the Soul Conference, which is the big conference now, experiencers are not allowed there. They said, we don't want the woo-woo stuff there because we're bringing in scientists. We want to impress the scientists. We don't want them to hear these bizarre stories about some woman who got abducted and got some message in her head. They'll scare everybody away. And it's like, well, we don't need these people. Like I always argued because one of the best jobs I ever had in my life was I was a bartender at the Faculty Club Lounge at the University of Manitoba in Canada. And when I was there, the first training I got was from a guy he was leaving to go work for the US military. And he told me, he said, Grant, here's your one lesson. Don't let these guys intimidate you. You got all sorts of deans, professors, full professors, presidents, vice presidents. Don't let them intimidate you. When they've had one too many beers, they're just like any other drunk on the street. And I realized after I worked with these guys for a number of years, these guys would get drunk. They'd be in the back room with some young student and they're hiding in the back room and stuff like that. And I realized that I was never intimidated. And we make this mistake that we bring in astronomers. And it's like, what the hell does an astronomer know about UFOs? He knows nothing. What does a chemist know? Nothing. What does a physicist know? Nothing. And because I remember I used to argue with, there's three deans I used to talk UFOs. One was human resource, human, human ecology. The other one was the dean of education, and the other was the dean of plant science. And he used to sit at the bar every night and drink 10 beer and then go home. And so he would sit there and he would sort of debate with me on UFOs. And I said to him, "Hey," I said, "you're the dean of plant science. You know how to plant a rose. You know exactly how to plant it. What the hell do you know about UFOs?" And he said, "Nothing." I said, "Exactly." And that's what people forget. They realize these guys know nothing about UFOs. And that's what's happening at the Seoul conference. So we're bringing in people because they got PhDs. Oh, this guy's got a PhD and he believes in UFOs. Isn't that cool? And it's like he doesn't know anything. He's a computer guy. Who cares? I mean, you know nothing. You got to be in the field. You got to be working with UFO stuff and the experiencers. And then you suddenly realize that when you're in the experiencer thing, that this is where the answer is. But we're still in this world of reputation and the materialistic paradigm and stuff. But I think the shift is coming in terms, especially if this experiment works that I'm working on. I think it's the biggest discovery I've ever seen in terms of actually showing that we can actually put on paper, because that's what people say. Oh, I need paper. I need evidence. If you go on AI, well, you guys don't have any evidence. So, these people have evidence and we need evidence. We need to be measured. Well, this is all going to be on paper. You're going to be able to explain it. You can run that test 1,000 times on these people. It's going to come up the same way every time. And then you got to start to explain this kind of stuff. And I think that's the thing. It's like we got an eternity to figure this thing out. We don't have to figure this thing. We live in the United States and in Canada where we want everything yesterday. And it can take us another 1,000 years to figure it out. It's got nothing to do with, do we figure it out? Do we get disclosure? Whatever. It's got to do with, where am I coming from? Where am I going? What did I agree to do in the world? How did I get to agree to move the ball this far down the field and do my little piece of thing? What am I supposed to be doing? That's what we got to worry about. So even if it takes another 1,000 years, but I do believe there seems to be a shift coming where we're moving to this consciousness thing. It's because people will say, "Well, we haven't made any progress." I say, "We absolutely have." You can go anywhere in the world today and say Area 51. I know what that is. China, I know what that is. You can go and say Skinwalker Ranch. I know what that is. Near-death experience. I know everybody in the world knows what a near-death experience is now. There was no such word before 1975. And it doesn't matter whether they believe it or they don't believe it. They know it's in your consciousness. And everybody, and then the young kids go, "Yeah, that's real." And that's what Max Planck said. Science advances one funeral at a time. The new generation is not offended with the idea. You don't win by convincing your opponent he's wrong. You win when your opponent dies, and the new generation adopts the idea, and that's what's happening. So we're to keep raising it, and it's what it's like. It gets to a certain point where it just suddenly flips, where you move it, and that's what we're doing. We're just everybody throws a little pebble on the scale, and eventually the scale will move.
Yes, and so let's look at the awakening awareness and consciousness around plant medicine.
Yeah.
And I know that can contribute to awakening conscious experiences and states, um, to face inwards, how you mentioned a lot of us want to look outwards, but it is all within. And so, share with me a little bit about your experiences when you first started with plant medicines, because again, this has been a subject topic that's shifted over decades. And so right now it's becoming more legal in some areas, and more people are turning to different types of medicines. But share with me what you have experienced so far.
Okay, the only reason I did, I'd never done anything like that in my life. But what had happened is we had written the book on contact modalities, and I realized that my theory is that there's a field. All the answers are in the field, that it's like the inventions come out of the field. It's all there. And it's the ability to access the field. It's the ability to shut the left brain down, get the signal, get in there. And usually happens by dissociation. So I tried meditation, and people say, "Well, you shouldn't," because I know, like, I got attacked when I first mentioned that I'd done the psilocybin. And they would say, well, you should use meditation and stuff. Well, like I'm 70, 72 years old. I mean, I really haven't got 30 years to learn meditation, to do it at the very high level. So it's like that, I'd done meditation, but it really not done anything. And I had tried all sorts of different protocols and stuff like that, and wasn't able to get in the field. I realized maybe that isn't my shtick. Other people are supposed to do that, and I'm supposed to do my little thing or whatever. And yet I got frustrated. I figured there's got to be a way to get in the field. And then I realized the psychedelics, you're going to get in the field. But I'm thinking, yeah, I don't know. Because I remember one girl I talked to and I said, what was it like? She says, it was horrible. It was the worst thing I ever did in my life. I was on this roller coaster and it's going up and the wheels started to fall off the roller coaster. And I said, they did? It's like, and I talked to this other girl and she says, yeah, I was, they kill your ego. So I was there and I saw myself dying and then I saw myself rotting. I go, really? I go, holy shit. Like, and there's the old deal that when you're doing these components, it's like the roller coaster. You get on the roller coaster, you ain't getting off. It's like you can't just say, "Okay, I'm turning around." No, no, no. You once you get on the ride, you're going on the entire ride. So I was really, really scared to do it, but I was so determined that I wanted to get in the field. I wanted to have some sort of experience because I'd had the UFO experience, but it was still a physical experience. I wanted some sort of experience that said, there's this spiritual component to the world. There's this world that doesn't really, it's not physical, it's all this kind of stuff. And I thought, okay, I'll do it, so that's when I said, when I first did it, I said, um, I was very secretive about it. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't use a guide or anything because I didn't want everybody to tell anybody I was doing it. And so that's when I had the idea where I said, okay, it was almost like a surrender thing, which is what you need to do. When I wrote the book on it, the very first page, I told Desta, I want one line. And I don't know if they told me this or whether I learned it or whatever, but the first line that they said, surrender is the rule. Believe me, surrender is the only rule. It's this idea until you surrender to whatever's happening, whatever your life is, the minute you surrender, suddenly you move up. And that's the whole thing. Is we're doing this thing where it's ego versus ego versus ego, and so I said, okay, I'm ready to do it, but I'm not. I don't want anything. I just want to. It was the idea of the field. That there was answers in the field. So I said, I'm going to school. I'm here for school. What do I need to know? And the first one was a situation where Desta and I were in Mexico. We come back from Mexico, and that was when they started putting the kids in the cages. And we came across, and there was into Arizona, and there was a family there. There was a family and an extra woman. So there's two women, a guy, and these two kids. And we were really upset because it was like a holiday or something, and it was like 2 hours to get across. We were walking, and it was the lineup went on forever, and we are going, where are we going to get across here? And it's like we're so pitying ourselves that it was going to take so long. And then suddenly, when it got there, these people were sitting there, and it was starting to get cold. It was like 5 o'clock. It was starting to get cold, and these people were sitting there in this cage thing. It was sort of like the compound they'd sort of sectioned off, and they were sitting there waiting, I guess, to be processed or whatever. And I'm thinking like, oh, this is terrible. And then the woman in front of us, they were complaining about the people, and then I suddenly realized these people had gone across to get their teeth fixed. And I'm going, well, you're complaining about them, but you're going over there and get your teeth fixed for one-third the price. And I was like, and then they went and asked them. They said, where are you from? And they said they were from El Salvador. And then I remember we went through, and the girl was about 10 years old. She only had one arm. She had one arm. She's got this ball. She's bouncing this ball, and her little brother is about 7 years old, and she's playing with her brother, and she's bouncing this ball around. And I'm going, how could these people be threats? I mean, the girl's only got one arm. Like, how could she be a threat? And I remember when we went back to Tucson, we left there, and we finally got out of there, and I'm thinking, but they're still there. They're still in this compound. And we got across, and we were so upset because it took us 2 hours to get across. And these people, they're very calm. They're just sitting there, and it was almost like the world had come to an end. They were just so depressed. They were sort of just sitting there as if it was all over. They were sitting in the compound. And I felt so sorry for them. I remember going back to Tucson. I'm thinking, I wonder if they got across yet. It was like the next day. I wonder if they're across yet. I wonder if they got through. I wonder if they, what's going on with them or whatever. And I wonder if they put this kid, separated the kids from the parents, put it. And so the first one was this thing on despair. The first lesson was on despair. And it started with this kid, this little 7-year-old kid. And I'm standing there, and this kid is standing right in front of me, and we're inside the cage, and this kid's looking at me, and he's just looking at me. And I just broke down crying. And it was like the kid was looking at me, and it's like, why didn't you do something? You saw what was going on. Why didn't you do it? Because I had never spoken out about it. And so that was the one. And then I had the one, the death one was really weird. It was just before COVID happened. And then all these things, I knew what the lesson was within the first couple of minutes. And the death one, I remember I woke up in this coffin, and I don't know how it was a coffin because I'm looking up. So how do you know it's a coffin? I'm in this big huge cathedral with big huge ceiling, whatever, and I'm in the front, and I'm going in. I'm going, hey, I'm in a coffin. This ain't too bad. This ain't too bad. It's okay. I'm lying in this coffin, actually very content lying there. And I'm going, what's going on here? And I could see the light, like in the top of a cathedral, you have the big stained glass windows, but the light was only coming in one side. And I'm going, the light's only coming in from one side. It's going across the coffin through this church. And there's nobody in the church. It's like, but I'm going, that's so weird. And then next thing you know, I'm above the earth and they're showing me over Western Canada and looking and you could see all the dead, all the people, like these little spirits coming up from the earth. And I knew just instinctively these were dead people coming up and they're dying. And then this voice says, look to the south. And I look to the south and it's just like, just piles of people coming out. And this is just before COVID hit. And so these were the kind of lessons I was getting. And then I sort of stopped. Like I got to about 20, and then he started getting kind of bad. They almost like when you go enough times, they sort of say, "Okay, you've been here 50 times. You've not learned your lesson yet. Get back there and learn the lesson before you come back here again. What are you doing? You're just wasting our time." This type of stuff. And they had the one where the fear thing came in. Now I don't know if they did this to shut the ego down or whether this is really because it really upset me. Because so I'm sitting there and I'm in this experience, and all of a sudden there's somebody down below me on the left side and it's a guy and he's on a computer and I'm going, did you hack reality? I couldn't see it, but I just said, look back and I said, do you hack reality? Boom, gone instantly. And I was just shaking. Man, I come out of that experience, I was just shaking. And then the next one, that's when they really dropped the hammer. I went in the next one and all of a sudden, again, but this time they're up on the right side and there's a bunch of these guys and they're army. For me, they're army guys on computers in army. And they're sitting there. I'm actually having a conversation with these guys about what are you doing? Like, how does it? And it was like you lit up because when you light up, we can pick you up. And it was this idea, can the government do this? Can they actually pick up when you light up so they can come into the field? They're in the field. They've learned to get in the field. And because I've lit up, they pick me up in the field. And then he says, we decided to take your piece off the board to make the game more exciting. And I'm like, you're what? And I got out and I started asking these channelers, can they do this? And then they all said the same thing. You don't understand how reality works. This whole idea, you're making reality. There's no out there, nobody's out to get you. It's like you're doing this kind of stuff. But that really shook me. And I go, and then one didn't, nothing. I don't remember anything happening. And I was like, I sort of stopped this. But what the bottom line of these things was it's just a different vibration. So you're going to get, I wanted to do the DMT, the 5-methoxy DMT, where there's no form. And that's the whole idea that there is no form. It's all when you get back to God, it's completely still. Because my idea of God is when the sparks come, it's almost like the Bible says God spoke. Or you'll hear numerous times the creations when God spoke, that God speaks, the vibration begins and the illusion begins, that God starts to vibrate. And that all the world is a vibration. So the source starts to vibrate and all these forms start to form. And the denser it gets, the more it's physical. So what you're going to have with all these different things, whether it's DMT or LSD or whatever, it's a different vibration. You're in a different world. And there's all these different vibrations, but yet they're not. I differ from people who say there's different dimensions. I say, no, there's only one thing. There's just one thing. It's all a verb. It's all alive. And my impression of the whole thing, whatever level you're doing, not level, but as you go, it's like you're at the bottom of the ocean and it's really dark and we're in this total, we don't know what's going on. We're in the dark. And then suddenly you learn to meditate and you start to float higher up and you see these fish and you come back into the dark and say, hey, I saw fish. And you go, oh, come on, Melanie. I see nothing. You're making this stuff up or whatever. And then the whole idea is you go up and you get even higher up by doing psychedelics or something, and then you're just amazed, like all the stuff you can see, and you go, wow, and then you see this fish, and or like DMT, you see this little elf, and you say, hey, what level am I on? And the elf says, what do you mean level? You're in the water, you idiot. There's no levels. You're just in the water. And the closer you get to the surface, the closer you get to the light, to the source. And the closer you get, the brighter it is and the more you can see. And that's my impression, is that all these things are just different levels that you can get that get you up closer to the light where you can see more things, and people are seeing these things and they do actually exist, because that's the thing I got out of it. Yeah, these things actually do exist, where in fact, the one time I actually thought I was talking to God. It was at first I saw him the one session, and it's like every describes it the same way, which is part of the whole experience, is that everything's individual. That the way you describe a near-death experience or a dream is you have the same bottom line experience, but everything's different inside the near-death experience. So I say all grays are different, all aliens are different, all UFOs are different. It's individuality is the rule. And so when I had this experience where the way I saw God was really weird, it was sort of like we're in a everything was dark. It was always dark, and yet it was a dark. It was like a hallway in a big warehouse, and it was over there. And I thought, is that God? But it was like a big, it was darker. It was like a square, like a big, huge machine. Is that God? And then it was like the next time, then suddenly it was right in front of me, and I go, are you who I think you are? And it's just like this dark thing in front of me, and it sort of gave me an indication. Yes, I'm going, this is so weird. I actually believed I was talking to God, but it was this box type thing. And so that's you. People will describe the light differently, and Jesus, or they'll say, it's real. Jesus, it's just real. They saw Jesus, and I go, which Jesus did they see? The guy with the blue eyes, the American Jesus, or did you see the Middle Eastern Jesus, or this thing? And people will always describe it. When you get down to it, I do a PowerPoint where I actually show maybe I even did it in Denver, where I showed the different grays. People say I saw grays. I said, take a gray. So I take Whitley Strieber's gray, and I take Whitley Strieber's gray versus Betty Hill's gray. And I say, do they look the same? They're not even close. Then I take Betty Andreasen's gray. Then I take Ron Johnson's gray, and all these grays. And you start to see they're all different. And that is the unique thing, is we want to put things into a box, and we believe we're looking for a pattern. And the pattern is there's no pattern. It's all your experience, that you're creating the experience. And the key thing is it's happening within you. So when you're doing remote viewing, you're not going anywhere. There was even one this morning I was listening to where this guy said it's within you. It's the universe is unfolded. So when you're remote viewing, the world is within you, and when you remote view, you just go within yourself and you go to the target. That's why when people are remote viewing, they don't say, "Hang on, I'm flying to the site. I'll be there in a minute." It's not You're not going anywhere. You're going within yourself, and that's what we've got to realize. It's all the whole universe is happening within your head, and that's when they said it's indigestible. That if you start to explain to people that the world is inside you. There's really nothing out there, that when you float away from your body, that you think you're going somewhere, that you look back and you see your body and you see your head. Is the consciousness in that head? No, it's up here. It's floating here. And the body is inside the consciousness. You can float to the window, and all the stars in the planet are inside your consciousness. And that's the hard part to explain to people, that it's going to take a couple of generations for people to hear these stories, when they start to grasp that this is not a simple subject, because it's so contrary to everything that we've been taught and brought up in school to believe. And that's why I say, when it comes to the bottom line, people say, oh, the religious people are going to jump off bridges. I say, absolutely not. The religious people can handle this. It's just another, God is this really powerful guy that can do all this kind of stuff. It's the guys who went to MIT that spent $60,000 a year to go to MIT, who suddenly realized, like, you're telling me that's all bullshit that I learned? All that stuff doesn't make any sense. And that those are the guys that have everything at stake, because they've got this worldview that's a left brain worldview, where it's all material, where it's ego, where I've got this all thing all figured out, and that's going to collapse. Because that's the worldview we're in. Where 93% of National Academy of Science, the top scientists, are atheists, and almost none of them believe in any paranormal phenomena. It's almost non-existent, and that's where you see the world, that we're moving this world, that we've almost come in on a thing, almost like the three waves. You hear the three waves of the UFO thing, that we volunteered. So when people are complaining about the world that there's this bad thing, that big, I say, hey, keep in mind that you may have chosen to come in at this time, in this place, in the middle of whatever mess you think you find yourself in. And maybe you came at this time in this place, in the middle of this mess, because you agreed to come here this time, this place, in the middle of this mess, because you put your hand up and said, I want to go. We need some people to help save the world here. I'll go, but put me in, put me in. And you volunteered to do that. So quit complaining about what it is and figure out what you're supposed to do and quit, looking at around. And that's when you see this whole idea that whether, even if it's not true, if it's not true that we didn't decide to do this, if you accept the fact that whatever I'm doing, I'm responsible for, then you start to move along. If psychologically, as long as you believe that it's your mother-in-law or Hillary Clinton or the dog ate the homework, you're never going to get cured. As long as you're going to blame somebody outside yourself. When you take responsibility for it, then you can actually move on, even if it's not your fault. You just say, okay, I take responsibility. This is the way it is. This is the card I was dealt, and this is the card I'm going to play, and I'm going to do the best I can with what I've got. So that's where you and I on this thing are. That's our role, is to move this ball down the field, to change the idea from victimhood to responsibility, to the fact that everything's done for a reason, that trauma will move you into the next field, and that we have a role to play, and that everybody's got a role to play, and that we came in, and when you leave the world, you're going to get asked how did it work out, and you're going to have the whole deal about what I'm interested in now is this whole thing about the life review, which I think is the most important thing that happens in near-death experiences, because you suddenly realize that you will face a moment when you show yourself your entire life and you see it from a third perspective, which shows how complex the world actually is. Not only is it recording every thought and every moment of existence, but it's doing it from a third person perspective. So if I say something that offends you, when I go into that experience, I'm going to be in your position, and I'm going to feel the pain that I caused you. And that you're going to see that. And when you suddenly realize that's going to happen when we leave the world, how you treat people completely changes. It's not like we can continue to throw people, in wandering around the world with no place to go and treat them whatever. That you're gonna face that reality and as Michael Newton said when he asked him, they said, well, what did the 7,000 people say when they got asked how did it work out? He said, everybody said the same thing. I could have done better. And that's what you got to realize. Like we could have done better. What is it there that I have yet to do that I agreed to do? That's why this test was so important to me. Even if it doesn't work, I couldn't live with myself if I didn't do the test, because I knew that when I got to the end of my life, I'd say, boy, I wish I'd done that test. And that's what you hear, because I worked on, people dying. And that's the worst death you can have is people who say, bring my daughter, bring my son. I want to say I'm sorry. And then they bring them from another side of the country, and they come, and then they hang on, and 5 minutes after the person says they're sorry, they die. Because to the unresolved life that I wish I could have done this, and that's the people that suffer at death time, is they realize that they could have done something, and they put it off, and now it's the end of their life, and they're trying to, almost like, people don't worry about death until someone says you got 3 months to live. And I've had that twice happen to me, where you get your affairs in order, and it's like, holy cow. Believe me, everything changes. It's like, oh my God. You just go like, whoa, what am I going to do? And everybody starts asking these questions. You and I spend our entire lives trying to answer that question. And these people have got like 3 months to figure it out. And that's where the panic sets in. They don't really know. They've never studied it. So I feel always honored that I got to play this role, whatever it is, that I feel like one of the luckiest people that I got to play this game. Because as I always describe it, it's like the Super Bowl. We not only do we realize there's a game going on, we're inside the Super Bowl. We're not watching. We are actually on the field. And we should say how many people can get to actually play on the field in the biggest story that will ever come down the pike. This is the biggest story. This consciousness whole thing that you and I are working on different levels. We all got our little pieces, and we're all working together to try to move this thing along. And as I said, I could have been an untouchable in the streets of Calcutta and spend my days in a junkyard looking for something valuable enough to sell for food for tomorrow. I didn't get that. I got to play in the Super Bowl, man. And it's like, maybe next time I'll be the guy in the junkyard in India. And so I better enjoy and do what I got to do right now because the next time, how can I get lucky so twice in a row? I'm not going to get this lucky a second time. And so respect the fact that you got to play the game and try to figure out what's my role in the game. What am I supposed to be doing?
Well, that's actually a wonderful point. And so, just a moment, how can we use that pinpoint, right? We want to collapse timelines, we want to quantum leap through and pass these sufferings and shifts consciously by going inwards. And so, how would you describe to someone to or how to collapse those timelines within themselves? And as you know, it's all within going in meditation, but how can we do that actively?
That's the big part. That was why I did the psychedelics. It's very hard
Mhm.
to tell people. I mean, we the contact modalities, we had 70 different modalities. So we go through all these different modalities that people use, whether it's a Conan, which, throws off the left brain by saying, what's the sound of one hand clapping? And that was used in the East. And so the left brain goes, yeah, what is the sound of one hand clapping? I think I could figure that out. And it goes off and tries to figure it out and say, get out of the way. So there's these different modalities that you can look at, in meditation. There's pain. There's pain is one of the ones. Dancing, where people dance until they sort of fall over, and it's the ability to dissociate. It's the to try to figure out the fact that you're being run by the left brain. You're being run by this little voice in your head that won't shut up or whatever. And even just the simple thing I was doing today, where they were talking about this meditation thing, where Dean Radin was talking about the fact that most people cannot do it. If you say, okay, 10, come back from 10, 10, breathe in, breathe out, 9, breathe in, breathe out, and don't think about anything. He said most people cannot get to 7. And this is what we got to realize that we, instead of doing the meditation where it's like an hour or something like that, you do it for 1 minute. So I do a lot of things where I'm at a stop sign or whatever, and then suddenly I'm starting to get upset, and I go, oh, come on. Okay, instead of getting upset, let's use this 30 seconds to sort of meditate. And I meditate while I'm waiting for the street light to change and stuff like that. And I find all these different things where I'm sitting there waiting for my coffee at McDonald's or whatever, and it's these little pieces to realize dissociation is the key. It's this to move away from the physical world that keeps you alive. Like you need the left brain to take you through life. But in order to understand what's really going on, you have to realize that you're being run by a thing in your head that can actually be very damaging. That it's making up stuff. It's trying to be skeptical. Like to me, I say you don't have to be skeptical. In fact, when Descartes, who came up with the idea of skepticism in the 1600s, and people always forget, he got it in 3 dreams. This is his whole idea. You watch your dreams. So he got it in dreams. And he said, he wasn't talking about skeptical of new things. He said, I may have to relearn everything I've ever learned. It's like Mark Twain was famously, supposedly has said, it's not the things you don't know that get you in trouble. It's the things that you know that just ain't so. And that's the thing is we got to realize we got to have this humility to realize that we're sort of we don't have it all figured out. That there are people around that have answers. So I'm always watching the experiencers. I think it's very important to watch the experiencers and what they're saying, what the messages that they're told, because I believe that they are getting the actual message or near-death experience people. When you watch that, then at least you realize this important thing about the life review, what's going to happen there, the fact that there's nothing to worry about when you die. Don't get so upset that because we always want to win. So we want to figure out how are we going to do this thing? How are we going to win? And it's really not really about winning. It's about playing the game and doing it the best you can. That you have skills that I don't have. You can do things I can't do, like channel, trans channeling. I mean, that was the other thing. I could never do that, so I'd ask Desta, and I was smart enough to know that I asked Desta, and then I would ask this Margie, and then I'd watch Paul Selleck, and then I realized how I could put them all together, and they were all saying the same thing, and then I realized what these important messages were, and spend your time on watching that rather than watching the TV thing, getting dragged into sports or living other lives. So it's sort of like when you're watching the Super Bowl, they pay $50,000 for a ticket. How many people are going to pay $50,000 for the ticket if they know what the final score is? No, they just go there for entertainment and they've got the money to do it. And it's the idea that you're living your life through other people. So if your hockey team or football team wins, then that you win. But if then you're all upset and you go like, why am I upset? It had nothing to do with me. They lost, so what? They lost. And that's where we sort of get dragged into watching the world around us and rather than figuring out what am I here for? What am I supposed to do? And following people who I believe actually have answers. And those are the experiencers, those are the trance channelers, to watch very carefully what they're saying and realize that there's a way you can do it. Like there are 70 different modalities to get in the field, but it maybe is not that important that you get in the field. The same as me, I could never meditate, so I never expected that I would suddenly get some revelation in meditation. But I do get downloads, and I do have this thing where I did the psychedelics, where I got a lot of sort of information that the world is not the physical world that people think it is.
Well, thank you so much for sharing everything with us today. Are you out of time today?
Yeah, I got my grandson coming. I usually babysit my
Okay.
grandson at the top of the hour, but let's do it again. I mean, give me a time down the road for say in 4 weeks or 5 weeks. If there's people have questions, we'll do maybe just questions next time and put it out there and see who's got a question that they, based upon what we've said today, that they have something, or they maybe have experiences. Maybe there's some people there. I used to run rabbit holes, which were very interesting, where we put 100 people online who all had experiences, and they get the chance to tell their story. They can turn the camera off and change their name, and they can tell their story that they've never told because they were ridiculed by their family, and because that's basically the thing, that we can do something like that with a little rabbit hole where people, because I like to hear people's experiences in terms of what they got, because that's how I found this couple that have the two souls in the body. Is eventually you're going to run into someone who's going to tell the story that you've been waiting years to hear, and then you tap into them, and that's how you learn.
Absolutely. Yes, we can schedule that. And I have some experiences myself I can share. So
There you go.
that'll be a
Yeah, I
great
can interview you.
conversation.
That'd be a good thing.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much, Grant, Cameron, and your experiences and share time. Thank you so much
Beautiful.
for joining us on Quantum